I'm gonna read to you guys a Shadowlands headcanon rewrite that is probably gonna blow your fucking minds. Because it blew mine. Just take it from me, man. Take it from me. Headcanon, best canon? Trust me, just... Wait till you hear this shit. If this shit doesn't make you tear up at some parts thinking about how fucking awesome it could have been, then... I don't know what will, man. This shit's pretty crazy. World of Warcraft, Shadowlands rewrite. Design goal. The goal of this rewrite is to clean up and fix issues within Shadowlands. The expansion had a lot of tonal inconsistencies and setting conflicts that broke the way death has been understood in the Warcraft franchise. Examples such as quests in Wrath or Mists show that the mechanisms of the Shadowlands were not the original intent of death, and that the setting has been adapted to account for these changes. Regardless of whether or not details in this end up being found as canon, the changes made within are to make things clearer and concise. This rewrite will not change the overall plot of Shadowlands. The Jailer will still be the main villain and antagonist. The Primus will remain as a dubious force in the background, and the fate of the Arbiter will remain the same. Everything should still be in a state where Dragonflight can reasonably follow up this expansion. This is a rewrite, not a replacement. There are two major mechanical changes to the storytelling that will alter the nature of the story. The first, the Shadowlands are not they're not the afterlife, they are purgatory. They are where most souls go before passing on to whatever awaits them. This will help remove the second life concept, which removes stakes from death, and it prevents living characters from just visiting dead ones. By making this change, the stakes of death are returned. Mystery and wonder are preserved, as the ultimate fate of souls is left up to mystery. The threat of the Maw is also shown to be much greater. The threat of the Maw is also shown to be much greater because souls will remain trapped there in torment and madness forever, as opposed to finding peace. This also allows for characters of the Shadowlands to integrate into future stories without absolutely destroying the stakes and running into the issue of X character knows something but died. Let's just go ask them in the Shadowlands. The second change is that domination is not absolute mind control. It is a process of daunting, breaking, and mastering the individual. Which I think is... Look, this is what sucks about domination, is that that's what it is. And it's fucked up because I feel like the way that he has to position this as a rewrite is kind of fucked because this is how domination should work. Domination is not absolute mind control. It is a process of daunting, breaking, and mastering the individual. This is similar to the concept of a battle of wills, which is different from a battle of power. Just because a being is more powerful doesn't mean that it can instantly conquer the will of a weaker being. Instead, the dominator will need to find cracks in the soul of the victim in order to corrupt and dominate them. This removes the cheap concept of instant domination. But here's the thing, is that all the people that we see instantly dominated, they have already been tormented in the halls of Torghast. Thrall, Jaina. I don't know about Bolvar, but he's been, Lich King before anyway, so he already is in there. He's already been influenced. Right, these characters that get instant mind controlled when he gets his power back, he already was kind of working on them. But that was lame because they didn't show that enough. They didn't show them ever breaking. And I think, dude, I'm gonna be honest, I think Shadowlands went really soft in that shit. I think the Shadowlands was really soft about that. Like, we never saw them really... we never saw them getting tortured. You know, we heard like chains rattling and we heard their haulers through the halls and the echoes or whatever, but it's like they didn't really sell it at all. And by the time that we get to the confrontation with the jailer, these people have already had their minds kind of racked by the jailer at least a little bit. But they don't say that. You know? Shadowlands should have been more gritty and brutal, and it's gonna be in this rewrite. Buckle up. The premise, as presented in Shadowlands, is a lazy way of making it so that the individual matters very little, and that the power of domination is absolute. What this does is destroy which is actually hilarious because the main point of the story is to show you that your individuality matters. Even in death, your individuality has power, right? Your willpower is a thing. And so it just doesn't illustrate that well at all. What this does is destroy the natural progression of the story, where things are happening because the characters make choices, and instead enforces the author's vision of this happens because I say it does. On the other hand, it also makes dominated characters inherently more tragic. If someone falls to domination, it's because someone used and abused a flaw of theirs. Their fall from grace involves both the choice of their dominator and their own pasts coming back to haunt them, which is appropriate for an expansion focused on suffering, as opposed to making them just a role that any character could have realistically played. With those two major changes in order, we're going to get into the character changes, starting with the Kython, the altered name for the Eternal Ones, in order to improve clarity and differentiate them from other eternal beings. It is said things were different in age of myth and times of yore. The tale of death and spring, or the cosmogony of the Shadowlands. Originally, the Arbiter, Zoval, sought to judge all souls equally and fairly. Those at peace would go beyond, and those with burdens would go to Bastion. Those with conflict would go to Maldraxxus, and those with sin would go to Revendreth. This balance kept harmony and flow within the Shadowlands, as deceased mortals would come in, and souls at peace would go out. Long was this balance kept, but it shifted upon the death of a great ram long ago. This creature was bound to nature and life, yet upon his death he was brought unto the Shadowlands. Unlike others of his kind, he could speak the tongue of mortals and was not fearful of danger. He told the Arbiter of his origins and his plight, of his beloved, of his end protecting her shrine when wicked mortals sought to deface it, and of his desire to reunite with her. Although moved by his plight, the Arbiter could not allow him to return. For why should this soul be allowed to return, but not others? It would not be fair. Preparing to arbitrate where the ram's soul would depart to, the nature of the realm had shifted. The hue of grasses below became vibrant, the air became more animated, the waters clearer and fires brighter. For standing before the Arbiter now was the ram's love, she of vibrancy and plenty, the Princess of Spring. Reunited with her love, the princess sought to return to her gardens with him, yet she found herself barred. She asked the Arbiter to allow her to depart with her love, but he forbid it. She attempted to plead with him, speaking of the love they shared, but he forbid it. She attempted to break down and force her way out, but he forbid it. She alone would be allowed to depart, he said. Her love's time had passed. The ram begged his princess to depart, to find new love and joy within the gardens, but she would not depart. The princess took her love into her arms and declared that if she could not depart with him, then she would not depart at all. Seeking to resolve this situation, the Arbiter called his fellow Kython to counsel. This was a dangerous situation, he said, for the presence of the princess could embroil conflict between the sisters and the Kython. Life and death would be opposed in open conflict. Though the Archon noted it would be best to force the princess to return to the gardens, the Primus saw an opportunity. If she wished to remain, he argued, then let her. Let her and her sister's chosen flow back to them. But she would remain here within the Shadowlands. For surely she would not wish their souls to be overseen by the Kython. Surely she would wish to nurture and spend time with them. That could be her duty, to ensure the restoration of these blessed souls. Amongst this chthonic kindred, the Primus spoke of different reasons. He argued that such a conflict between life and death could bring about calamity, and that such a situation would require delicate influences. The Archon looked upon him and sensed that while he was being deceptive to the princess, his desire to protect his charges in the Shadowlands was genuine. The Redeemer, who is, Denathrius, meanwhile had gone to speak with the princess and hear out her side of the story, of her love for the ram, and of her sisters. The purity of her love found fellowship within him, and he spoke of his love for his own children he had sired alone. Such strange a friendship was founded that day, but one that has long endured. The Redeemer had decided then to agree with the Primus's proposal, but that she could not only be allowed this role, but also a realm of her own within the Shadowlands, one that she could make akin to her home, so that she felt not so lonely and forlorn. After much discussion and debate, a vote was called. The Arbiter wished to see the princess returned to her gardens, as he disagreed with the unfair nature of allowing certain chosen to return to the realms of the living while barring all others. He was dismayed then to see the vote was put against him. The Primus and the Redeemer had voted in favor of the princess's wish, while the Archon had abstained. Lionstar, thank you very much for the 5-month resub. So it was that the Princess of Spring was allowed to remain with her love, and from that love sprung forth the great woods of Ardenweald. She became queen of this new realm, and her love became lord of the hunt. This decision weighed heavily upon the Arbiter, as did the judgments that followed. Now, instead of being judged by their own merits, the connections of a soul allowed them to bypass the path they had set themselves upon. If a soul committed terrible deeds but was bound to nature, it was given to Ardenweald instead of being sent for penance in Revendreth. The same was true for conflicted souls or burdened ones. This was wrong. This was not how death was supposed to work. This was not right. It was not fair, which is crossed out on purpose. He's telling a little bit of a story here. This conflict within his own nature of equality broke the Arbiter. He could not allow this. He would not allow this. Life may be unfair, but all souls would be equally judged by their own merits in death. He begged the other Kython to reconsider, to stop this encroachment of life before it was allowed to take root. But everything had changed since then. The Archon had become distant and aloof, disconnected and apathetic to all but their duties. The Redeemer, while friendly as always, silently grew averse to this new order, of how wicked and corrupt life's blessed could be. And the Primus, oh, the Primus. While the Archon had grown distant, the Primus was constant in all of the Kython's workings. He laid plans upon plans, working constantly to ensure that this new order was kept and that Ardenweald was protected and watched. It was due to these plans that he discovered what the Arbiter was doing and was able to stop him, but not before his own plans were enacted in part. For a section of Ardenweald had been lost, cast adrift within the Shadowlands. The princess, now queen, mourned those lost so deeply that her form shifted from that of vibrant spring to solemn winter. For this transgression, the Arbiter was stripped of his symbols and role and cast down into the depths of the Shadowlands, where he would remain until he recanted his actions. So I think what's missing here, maybe it got taken out, The Arbiter Zoval, his action was to basically strike at Ardenweald and to undo the realm that the queen had settled for herself. And in doing this, the others found reason for which they could imprison him. It was there that he had found the fragment of Ardenweald that was lost. In the depths of the Shadowlands, it was joined to other parts of the Shadowlands that were long since forgotten. But he was not alone, for other souls had already taken refuge in this place. Those who had slipped through the cracks, lost. Overwhelmed by the injustice these souls had faced, the not-quite Arbiter claimed this broken realm as his own. Although no longer truly counted amongst the Kythen, his own nature as a deity allowed him to bind it together. Thus, this fragmented realm of the lost was reborn, called Korthia by its inhabitants. But while this was happening below, above there was a growing fear within the Primus's heart. What if the Arbiter had returned? Even cast down, he remained a deity, and look at what that strength had done to Ardenweald. What if his ire of the now Winter Queen was not alone? What if he sought after the other realms and their souls? The Primus had to protect them all, and to do that, he needed to keep the Fallen One away. So it was that he vanished for a time, at least amongst the Shadowlands. Where he went and what he did is unknown, but what is known is that the Primus returned having forged a new power: domination. This shadowy force draws upon the desire and flaws of others, the chink in the armor of their souls, and binds them to that darkness. Using this power and his tactical mind, the Primus descended in guise to the Shadowlands below, where he met with his fallen brother. Exactly the nature of that discussion is lost to time, but the results are unfortunately well known. The jailer was born that day, his form broken, just like his soul. He desired to see justice restored, ultimately succumbing to vengeance, and a wish to see all those who abandoned others punished. The lost would rest peacefully within the black boughs of Korthia, but the rest would suffer. They would be punished for their ignorance, for their arrogance. Death was never meant to be chained, and they would suffer for their hubris. Great was the monument to suffering built that day, an endless tower filled with darkened halls. All had gone according to the Primus's plan. Now that their jailer was bound to this new realm, this hungry maw from which none could escape, he would speak to the other Kythen. This new realm, he argued, would be the perfect place for souls too dangerous to allow within the other realms. Those of the truly wicked, with no hope of redemption, even in Revendreth. This thought greatly perturbed the Redeemer, Denathrius, who remained silent throughout this conversation. Meanwhile, the Archon was uncaring, telling the Primus to do as he will. The Winter Queen, still sorrowful over the loss of nature-bound souls, was glad to see the jailer punished for his actions. The Primus revealed something else, however. A brilliant spark of purest white, encased in an orb of gold. This was the heart of the Arbiter, and from it, they could create a new Arbiter, a better Arbiter, one who would not seek to bring ruin to the Shadowlands. Placed in the heart of a great construct, a new Arbiter was created to perform its duty in absolute efficiency. Thus was the state of the Shadowlands for a long, long time. So long that only the oldest of souls remembered the previous Arbiter, and the jailer was instead known in fear. Forgotten was the past, and all continued upon this new path of apathy, fear, despair, and hate. No, truth, protection, renewal, and purity. And what he's done here is this is what it really is. And this is what it's masked as. Here we get into zones. Korthia. Zoval the Arbiter, Judge of the Dead. Later, Zoval the Jailer, Judge of Ruin. Zoval the Arbiter, instead of whatever his design is supposed to be in-game, his original form as the Arbiter would instead be inspired by Osiris of Egyptian mythology. His weapon would be a flail that also serves as a set of scales. Mayet, fulcrum of the Shadowlands. These are the scales upon which he weighed mortal souls in times forgotten. Zoval the Jailer, having been stripped of his station and broken by the Primus, the Jailer would be a shadow of his former self. His garb would be broken, torn, and faded. His form, too, would be broken up, with some limbs missing and instead having them replaced by constructs of his soul, bound together into this form by the runes of domination. It's so cool, dude. Zoval the Judge. After reclaiming his power from the false Arbiter, the Jailer's appearance would change to be a dark reflection of his original Arbiter design. To follow the Osiris parallels, his skin would take on a dead hue, and the stitching marks where his limbs were missing would be visible. He would also reclaim his weapon, although by this point, the scales would be broken, and the balance would permanently lean towards guilty. Thematically, it's very cool, dude. So this concept of him having scales as a weapon, and after him, like, reclaiming his mantle of Arbiter, the fact that domination has, like, broken his soul, leaving his weapon broken so that the balance of the scales on the weapon permanently is tipped towards guilty, is some of the sickest thematic shit I've ever fucking heard, dude. I think that's fucking awesome. Like, that's definitely, like, way more thematic and cool than what we got with the Jailer. So, backstory / plot. While he is the villain, the Jailer would be presented in a more tragic light. Here, from earlier on in the story instead of just at the end. His core essence as Arbiter was that of equality, of fairness, of justice. The introduction of Ardenweald ultimately broke his core tenet, which caused him to seek equality at any cost. This is ultimately what allowed the Primus to dominate him, as he was twisted to believe that the only way to make everything fair was to make everything suffer equally. An eye for an eye, that kind of deal. He saw creation as filled with injustice, and he wanted to make all things just. Importantly, this does not exonerate him of his actions. While his domain being broken essentially caused him to lose his mind, it was only after the effects of domination began to break upon him, once the Forsaken began arriving in his realm, that he actively sought the downfall of all. Oh, I like that you went with Forsaken there, actually. Now that makes a lot more sense with the Sylvanas and Undead connections. Wow. The people in the Maw with the Jailer being called Forsaken would have been really nice. Damn, that would have been a nice touch, dude. The connection between Sylvanas and the fucking Forsaken then would just be that much deeper. Through the use of the Darkened Valkyr. Wow. I didn't catch that when I first read this. It's what it feels like to be lost in limbo. To be forsaken. Not dead, but not living either. Just caught in the cracks. That's fucked. It's rather similar to Malagos in that way. His one moment of lucidity was of darkness. Yeah, it's a good comparison. It starts with being implied, but is later explicitly stated that the Jailer did not begin to break free of domination until the presence of Azerothian spirits arrived within Korthia, the largest group of which is the Forsaken. Any Forsaken who died, for any reason, were doomed to be among the lost, which is why they saw the Maw. That would have been a nice tie-in. It's made explicit that Sylvanas has formed a covenant with the Jailer, and this is why she can use Korthian magics. The strength of Korthian magics are directly paralleled by the strength of the Jailer, since they ultimately draw upon him. This means that the more souls the jailer has claimed, the more powerful both he and Sylvanas become, sorry. Oh god, the more powerful, oh my god. This means that the more souls that the jailer has claimed, the more powerful both he and Sylvanas become. It doesn't make them come more powerful. That's... Okay, her name would be foreign to those of the Shadowlands, and amongst them, she would be called by her covenant name, the Executioner. It's kind of cool. Sylvanas also, by the way, is said to be the first actual Maw Walker. So, I don't know if that's something that is worked into this or that you considered, but they do... I think it's in the Jailer cosmology book or whatever. Sorry, the world is ending right now, apparently. So I like here how you're directly, like, stating Sylvanas has formed a covenant. That's why she has this magic. And the stronger that the jailer gets, the stronger that she gets, right? Would make sense. They kind of have this weird power scaling with Sylvanas that's not fully explained, I don't feel like. It's pretty clear that she's under the influence of or working with some kind of additional power, but, you know. I like that you turned Korthia into something else. We're going to get into that. And this Forsaken, again, this Forsaken tie-in, it's nice. And Azerothian spirits being the reason why the jailer's breaking free of domination. That's very interesting. I mean, that ties in what they tried to do with that stupid fucking portal at the beginning of the zone. Oh, let's show this portal reacting to their presence and then never really talk about it again. Like, what are we fucking doing? Korthia, what the Kythan call the Maw, is not like the Maw found in canon. Instead, it is a twisting realm built of lost and forgotten things. Structures, landscapes, etc. have been abandoned and forgotten. These things all stack and compound with one another, leading to a realm that is both blended and a mess. To echo the line in Chronicles about the Shadowlands being twisting labyrinths of decay, Korthia reflects that by having several areas with elemental themes as Torghast does in canon. Instead of having them just be elemental torture rooms, however, the subzones of Korthia are instead the decay/negative aspects of the elements, inspired by the quasi-elemental planes, regions of salt, dust, ash, and vacuum. Which, that would be sick. This is like a more intellectual take on the torture aspect of Torghast, in my opinion. Torghast has very basic, lame... It's like spikes and fire. It's like, okay, dude. The 4 subzones spiral around Torghast, which is the central point of the zone. In order to reach the tower, one has to make their way through them. These zones are filled with dangerous landscapes, terrible monsters, and treacherous traps. Events will be added to the zone where players can help the souls within, sometimes rewarding them with a boon, but other times leading them into traps. When the player enters Korthia, it is to a random place among the subzones each time. At the edge of each subzone is one of the 4 waystones. Each has a slightly different appearance, but they all can be interacted with to open the rift to Oribos. The grove within Korthia is the one safe place, with everywhere else being filled with suffering. It is located between the lands of salt and dust. The jailer's forces do not attack the grove, and there is no hostile creatures in the area. There are no hostile creatures in the area. Only the souls of the lost. This place serves as the player's refuge within Korthia, and also where Venari's cave is hidden away. Perceptive players will be able to notice that Nathanos is sometimes visible within the grove. That would be a nice touch, because he just basically got thrown away. You know. So that kind of sucks. The Eye of the Jailer is still present, although instead of being bound by a metal cage, it is instead inscribed with several runes. During the expansion, it is confirmed that Odin's deal with Muzala did not involve the Jailer at all. It was made with the Primus, who wanted a way to more easily keep watch over the Jailer. When the Primus was defeated, the Jailer was able to claim the Eye as well. Although Odin is able to see echoes of the Shadowlands due to his deal, the only realm he can actually see is Korthia, which is why he and any in his confidence believe that to be the Shadowlands entire. And it's interesting because I think that you hit a nice detail here. It is said that when Odin looked into the land of the dead, that he saw life even there. So this stays true to that. Keeps those little details from things like the short story potentially accurate and relevant. And I like the idea of him being working a deal with the Primus. When the Primus was defeated, the jailer was able to claim the Eye as well. The Eye will also be part of the Zone meta event inspired by Guild Wars 2. At certain points after enough content has been completed or time passed, an event will begin that culminates in attacking the Eye of the jailer. Successful completion of this event will allow players temporary access to shortcuts throughout the zone. The introduction experience is greatly changed for Shadowlands. The leaders were not carted off by Mossworn Kyrian, but by members of the Nine, after being led into ambushes by Sylvanas. The only reason this is known is due to Tyrande, who was not captured and able to fend off Sylvanas. In that encounter, Sylvanas attempted to use Korthian magic to bind Tyrande, but the light of Elune shattered it like glass. Tyrande vows before Elune that she will see to the Banshee's end. The jailer is not happy with Sylvanas going after Tyrande, as he originally only intended the other four. He tells her that love brings only ruin. Entering into Korthia for the introductory experience plays out differently. The arrival is scripted to occur within the lands of Ash, and the player arrives with Tyrande. Unlike them, the Knights of the Ebon Blade essentially have the default Korthia entrance, being placed randomly throughout the zone. This means that everyone is separated, except for Tyrande and the player. Instead of running off at the first whisper of Sylvanas, Tyrande and the player are beset by monsters. They're chased by smoldering echoes, which Tyrande challenges to stand before the wrath of Elune. Smoke then clears to reveal the echoes. Burning Kaldori, whose screams are broken by choking coughs on the ash. They reach out to Tyrande as her eyes go wide. She begins hyperventilating and starts coughing on the ash of this place. Whispers amongst the echoes beg Elune to save them, but Tyrande can do nothing. Choking on ash and begging their forgiveness, she notices a lithe figure in the distance wearing a black cloak. Tyrande screams and gains a mantle of moonlight, charging at the individual who flees to the south. This leads to a labyrinthine cave system where the floor falls away from under the player at points. It is extremely dark, and the only light is a faint echo up ahead. Eventually, they are able to follow that light, and it is Tyrande, her mantle the only source of light here. Still extremely shaken and running on pure adrenaline, Tyrande tells the player that it was Sylvanas, but that she managed to escape into this maze. She wants to keep going, but the player notes that she's basically ready to collapse. It is left ambiguous how much time has passed since the two arrived in Korthia. So, a hint here that time is potentially moving differently here. And Tyrande is involved in a storyline where she sees what has happened to some of these souls that have come to the Maw. And, yeah. It's pretty fucked up. One thing I think I'm sort of missing here is understanding how and why these souls have got here at this point. I don't know if the breaking of the Arbiter and the change of the flow of souls was explained. Did I miss that? I think I feel like we went over it kind of briefly. I don't know if you plan to expand upon that. I don't really cover that much because it's pretty similar to canon. Oh, I see what you're saying. So you're kind of leaving... Yeah, I mean, it's up to you, of course. There's a lot here, but I would consider noting that so that people can understand that at this point, it is explained in the original game. So if you guys are understanding it that way, then good. But so everybody knows, at this point, the flow of souls is broken, and souls are going into the Maw. And so the thing, you know, the stuff of the disabling of the Arbiter and stuff, like, that still happens. I can add a minor line for clarification. I might, because at this point, I'm wondering, like, how are these Kaldori souls here? And so, yeah, it'd probably be good to just put that in there, if you care. I mean, if it's like, you know. And yeah, I like how you put, instead of running off at the first whisper of Sylvanas, Tyrande and the player are beset by monsters. I like that. Okay, so to continue, after it is left ambiguous how much time has passed since the two, which is Tyrande and the player, arrived in Korthia. When the Korthia is what we call the Maw. The Maw has been repurposed in this case and is in its Korthia, this restructured zone as previously described. Tyrande states that she could not save her people, but by Elune, she will avenge them. The two continue, even in Tyrande's exhausted state, with Elune's light their only source of vision until they manage to find an exit. They exit not into ash, but into the lands of dust. It is here that in the distance they find Darien Mograine, one of the horsemen of the Ebon Blade, being beset by a creature made of dust. The figure in the dust asks Darien why he would betray him and seek to doom another to darkness. The voice of the figure is that of Tyrion. Darien is resolute that he tried to do what was required. The voice of the figure then shifts to that of Alexandros Mograine, who questions if he would have done the same, even to him. This leaves Darien shocked, and the figure takes this opportunity to stab Darien in the chest with what seems to be the corrupted Ashbringer. As the figure asks him, "Who do you?" it is cut off by Tyrande and the player arriving. The two then fight against the torment and destroy it. After this torment is destroyed, Tyrande moves to help Darien. The player pulls the corrupted Ashbringer out of his chest and it dissolves into dust, revealing it as a manifestation of torment. Tyrande prepares to heal him using the light of Elune, but sees his radiance burns and is left panicked for a moment. His radiance burns and is left panicked for a moment. After finding her resolve, she determines that Elune's radiance may be too much for him in this weakened state, and instead rips a part of his cloak to patch the wound until they have more time. Darien is left unconscious, with an exhausted Tyrande carrying him. The player then hears a melodious... Is it a melodious sound? Or, yeah, I think that's melodious. I don't know how to say that. Melodious, melodious, melody. Continuity and references, yeah, it's nice. From where do you get this rewrite? One of my moderators, who's in the chat right there. His name's Lumino. It does have the light/void style dynamic of the good and bad residents. Darien is left unconscious, right? The player then hears, I'm going to say, melodic sound, which the group follows. They arrive at the waystone of dust, which seems inert. Tyrande touches the waystone, but nothing happens. The player then touches it, and it springs to life, opening the rift. Yeah, that's way better. Like, what the fuck? Torn between wanting to hunt down Sylvanas and helping Darien, Tyrande is convinced by the player that they need to regroup. The player is able to enter the rift, and so is Tyrande. Darien is unable to do so. Tyrande decides to stay behind with Darien, and to hopefully find the other Knights of the Ebon Blade, so that together they can hunt down Sylvanas. As the player departs through the rift, she prays that Elune guide their path. As in Tyrande prays that Elune guide, she says that to us. This is the end of the revamped Shadowlands introduction. There you go. So I like that way better because you're establishing the connections with Sylvanas and the Jailer. You're fleshing out who the Jailer is significantly more. You are putting Tyrande in a relevant way in the story instead of just throwing Thrall, Jaina, and Anduin in there because Lamau. And the way that you tell the story of activating the rift is interesting. The way that you're incorporating the negative aspects of things like dust and ash is I think, just frankly way more creative and way more D&D-esque than what we got in the game. The fact that Elune's light can kind of like penetrate in this place, I think, is an interesting detail that I'm sure you'll mention further in the future. And I don't know, it's the dynamic between the Tyrande-Sylvanas situation. Tyrande being faced with the torment of the Kaldori more directly, I think, is a good choice. Having opportunities to see hints of Nathanos within the Maw, I think, is also a good choice. And it also could explain, in a better sense, how Tyrande understands or knows that Nathanos is dead. That aspect of the storytelling where the Jailer deceives Sylvanas by not giving her that information. The way that Tyrande mentions that to her. I think that that would be a nice way, because, you know, Tyrande could have fucking seen him in the Maw or something like that. Not that Tyrande wouldn't know, I guess, but the fact that she sees him would have been, you know, better. I like how you work the Primus in, basically, and we're gonna get more into this, but identifying that he is trying to protect the Shadowlands, but the means through which he accomplishes it is very sketchy. And I really love how you say that he goes on like this, he disappears and goes on this journey, and who knows where he was or what he was doing, but when he came back, he had domination. That's fucking sick. I like that a lot, because obviously for me, I like that because it opens that door even further for, like, who did he go and work with to make domination? Like, where'd he get that? You know, connecting it potentially with the Titans, right? I think that's pretty sick. I really like what you've done. And I like that you used Tyrande's attempt to open the gateway to kind of maybe further evidence that Azeroth herself is potentially a greater power and influence than Elune. And you kind of show that player connection early. I like that. I like how it's kind of, you know, explained what was done with the Arbiter, so, you know, it's less just ambiguous. It's just so ambiguous, I feel like, in the main game. Some people would agree or disagree, pardon me. And also the fact that Tyrande is able to pass into the rift even if she can't enter. Right, the fact that Darien can't get out, I think, is a neat little I don't know, that's just like an interest. It just makes for an interesting scenario. How often in WoW have we gone to walk through a portal and one of the people with us for some reason can't come through it? I haven't really, like, seen that. And if it exists, I don't remember it in any significant or interesting fashion. So that's just kind of like an interesting, like, that could happen in like a Baldur's Gate story. You know what I mean? Where, like, for some reason one of your party members cannot come through the portal, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? We got to figure out why that's happening, or we got to go on without him, you know, or whatever that is. I just think you're just like, you're drawing upon inspiration clearly from, like, the like wide breadth of possibility that comes from things like D&D, and incorporating it, like, and I think that's also, like I said, shown a lot through Salt and Dust and Ash. Like, you're also hitting on the themes of suffering, equality, protection, redemption. Like, we're gonna go through all that stuff, right? So, guys, we're only literally at the introduction end, and that's only 9 out of 36 pages.